Welcome to Poppy Playtime. Now I know what you're thinking. Oh my god, he's not wearing a beanie. Does that mean he's been bleeding out of his ass for the last 2 years? But that's not important, because today we are going to be ranking each of the Poppy Playtime chapters to date, which includes Chapter 5. I found Poppy Playtime about a month ago. I had already previously played Chapter 1, and, things came back around. I needed to get a video done, and I figured, you know what, I already had Chapter 1. Might as well just play that again. It's something I have. And then, sure enough, I just started going down the rabbit hole, and it's been the only game I've been playing for the last month at this point. Let me tell you, what is going on? So I thought it'd be fun. I thought it'd be fun to recap our time so far that we've spent the last month and go over what I would deem the best and the worst. Right here, we got our little ranking board. Up at the top, next to the Playtime Co, we have our number 1 slot, all the way down to the bottom to Catnap's hoe ass, where number 5 is. So let's kick things off, starting with Chapter 1. Chapter 1, we start off being in the Playtime Co factory, and we get introduced to some of the main characters. This is sort of our pilot. This is our tester. This is our piece of paper that you spray your clone on, if you will. And we get a little bit of a feel for some of the things that you're going to kind of see throughout the game, such as different puzzles you have to solve, from, connecting power lines, connecting power cores, and getting the hands. You start off, you walk in, and then you instantly are met with a tape from Leith Pierre himself saying, "What up, ho? Why you in here? You're gonna get gatted." Pretty much. That's basically what he said.
This facility is full of hidden motion triggers. I just hope that you're certain whatever you're doing is worth it.
And then after you do that, you're met with your first challenge. You find a code, you open up a door, you get your grab pack, and then you move on. This one's a very short one. It's pretty much after you get past this first section, you get to a second section where you need to get the red hand, and then after you plug in all these cores and it gives you the red hand, then you go to your final section, you make a B-cat that is doomed to hell, and then as soon as you are leaving, then you are met with Huggy Wuggy, who you actually do see a little bit earlier in the game, but then he disappears, and then you're like, huh? Who the hell happened here? And then at the very end, when you're trying to leave after you insert your toy, Huggy Wuggy comes out the woodworks, and then he just starts chasing you through the vents, and then he falls to his death, and you finally get to hear a little bit of voice from the one and only Poppy, because you let her out of her case, and she's like, "You let me out of my case.
You opened my case."
Now, this game, I honestly had no idea how low resolution it sort of was, like detail-wise, until I went back and rewatched the playthrough that I did from it, because I was already so used to the later chapters by this point. When I went back and watched it, it's actually so far underdeveloped compared to the new ones that have come out. Chapter 1, I mean, there's not really much to speak for. It's the free version, it's the teaser, it's to get you involved. There's not a lot going on. It's a quick playthrough, and Huggy Wuggy's pretty cool. So it's like, they did a really good job at hooking you in, but compared to the rest, it doesn't really compare. I mean, you're not really learning a whole lot of lore quite yet. I'd give this a fat 4. I just mainly put out a 4 again just because there's not much to it. You're not really doing a whole lot. There's just one stressful chase scene, and that's about it. But again, it's all just a huge introductory to what you're going to be doing in the other chapters, so therefore it doesn't really have a whole lot of weight behind it to put it elsewhere. But that being said, that swagways us into Chapter 2, Mommy Longlegs. I can't remember what Chapter 2 is called. What is it called? Caught in a web? Fly in a web? Chapter 2 already kind of starts hitting you with a curveball, because it starts off from where you left off on Chapter 1, and that's when you let Poppy out of her case. And real quickly, Poppy is just next to you being like, "Yo, we need your help. Get over here. What are you doing?" And I remember that kind of just threw me off, because I was like totally expecting Poppy to be like the main villain we were fighting through this whole series. I didn't know she was kind of a good guy who was helping guide you through stuff. That just threw me through a loop, kind of a weird thing. So quickly after you save Poppy, she basically is like, "Yo, I'll help you get out of here. there's a train and it'll take you away from all this. And follow me, I got the code. And then that is when we are introduced to this freaking spaghetti long leg spider having mother flipping hairy dogging mother mommy milkers. This is when we're introduced to Mommy Longlegs, and she is coming down from the freaking woodworks being like, yo, no, you gotta earn the code. And then you're like, what? So then Mommy Longlegs trains you through a series of different games in the game factory. So this is when we start to get deeper into the playtime code. We're not really on the surface level where we're just at the front door. Now we're getting into the woodworks here. And she has you do a couple of different challenges. I think it's starts off with the whatever that color game is. It's like blue, red, and then you click blue and then red. So yes, first game you do is Musical Memory. Now Musical Memory is where she just hangs a giant rabbit with symbols above your head, and he gets closer, and you have to do the correct sequences, and every time you do the correct sequence, he goes back up. So your goal is to get him correct, and if you get it wrong, he gets closer. You don't want him to get too close. After you defeat that, which is fairly easy, then you move over to Huggy Wuggy, and this one's terrifying. You basically just have 40 billion Huggy Wuggies that you'd never see again in the future, which I find kind of interesting. But you have 40 billion big boy Huggy Wuggies that are just crawling at you from these freaking vents in pitch black, and then they'll just growl at you like when they're getting really close. And then you just have to make sure you're kind of keeping them back. It's a whack-a-mole with Huggy Wuggies. After you defeat that, then you're on to what I think is a really terrifying concept, which is the frickin' red light, green light kind of frickin' Squid Games thing that they got going on with the frickin' Pug-a-Pillar, which every time the light goes on, you can't move. You can look around, but you can't move. And every time the light goes off, the music's playing, then you can move again, and you basically got to get out of that section. After you complete the third and final game, then you kind of go down between these tunnels. You kind of evade Mommy whatever the milkers are, and then finally I think she starts chasing you in the end, and then she's booking after you, and you break her ankles real quick, and then she just dives headfirst into a meat grinder. And then tell the bear from Toy Story I said hi, bitch. And then you're pretty much free to go. You figure out the code, you boot up the train, and Poppy's freaking selfish hoe ass at the very end was like, hey man, I was gonna let you go, but I lied, we need your help. And then like derails your train, so then you're like back into the freaking thing, and then you crash the train into oblivion. Not fun. Did not appreciate her for doing that. Chapter 2, I wanna say, is probably easily gonna take my number 2 spot for me. That's just because like I had a lot of fun with Chapter 2. It was a great mixture of hard gameplay, but it wasn't hard at the same time. There was a little bit more lore baked into it, just with like a little bit more tapes and stuff like that. On top of it's really actually setting the stage of, oh, what are we getting into here? There's a bigger mission at hand than just trying to figure out where the hell all of our coworkers went, you know what I mean? Plus, I think Mommy Longlegs is a nice, creepy character. I think the main thing that really ties her together is the fact that her pupils like dilate like crazy, like she's a snake almost. Like I think that's the biggest aspect of her that I find most that makes her really creepy. If she didn't do that, then I don't really give a shit. But I think it was good. It introduced us into a bunch of like tiny, cool characters that are scary and whatnot, and it was just overall a solid chapter. You just couldn't hate on it. Next is the all dreaded Chapter 3. Even after knowing what the prototype looks like in Chapter 5, this is the scariest character in the whole freaking thing. Debate me in the comments. I freaking dare you, bro. Catnap is the worst. By far the worst. Chapter 3 was not fun for me at all. So Chapter 3 basically starts off, and Catnap has just swept us off our feet and taken us from the train wreck that occurred after Chapter 2. And he just instantly looks terrifying the way he just drops you down the hatch. He's just like, and you're instantly in this trash compactor sort of bog area where they're getting rid of trash. I don't know. You're in a trash chute somewhere and they're compressing and there's all this weird mechanical stuff going on. This one really pissed me off because it started off very weird in the sense of like, I think my game was glitching out, so it was letting me walk into areas that I wasn't supposed to walk into, and it wasn't really as obvious as the other chapters so far as to where I'm supposed to go or what I'm supposed to do. So it just instantly threw me off and was very confusing. And you finally work your way through through this trash area. That's when you get on this gondola that takes you down to the Dome of Doom. The gondola takes you to Playcare, which is the on-site Playtime Co. orphanage that they have built, which is so weird considering it's this Truman Show dome that they built in the middle of a cave somewhere, and they were like, that's where we're going to stick these orphans, and then we're going to just paint the perimeters with clouds, and they're going to have a great time. And the main challenge that you kind of learn is that there is a gas valve where you have to shift over the gas somehow to get it out of the area so that you can kind of work through more stages of the game, I believe. Red smoke is just basically chloroform that they put in a toy and gave to kids. But before you do that, you need to start up this backup generator, which requires you to start up backup generators for each of the buildings that are in the Playcare, which is so freaking annoying. In this chapter, one of the different characters that we see as kind of like a little villain is Miss Delight. She is a teacher who just constantly follows you until you look at her, then she stops moving, and you basically have to work through this entire freaking, like, half of this freaking chapter while this chick's following you, which is so it freaking grinded my gears, because before that you had to restart the generator in one house, which was so intricate and elaborate it took forever for me to figure out how to walk through there, and then knowing I had to do that again while I had this chick following me, that freaking pissed me off. They just upped the freaking ante on the scariness and weirdness in this chapter for sure. It went from like, okay, we're on track, this is keeping the theme of we're in a playtime factory, and then this chapter's like, psych, you're in hell. In chapter 3 too, we also start to see glimpses of what the prototype might look like, in the sense there's this scene where Catnap is hitting a gnarly freaking T-pose while looking at the shrine he made of him. They explain in this chapter too that Catnap also views him as a god because the prototype saved him somehow, and so he's just like bootlicking the prototype like a mother. After you kind of work through getting all the generators up and running, and you finally get the final power core to power up the main generator to move the gas, then Catnap of course comes in and says, psych, you ain't doing that, and you go into your final frickin' scene where you're fighting Catnap. This was annoying because it was not really intuitive in my opinion of what I was supposed to be doing in this ending piece, because there was a lot of moving parts that was explained in a very brief way, so it was like, in my head I was like, surely this is not what they got me doing right now, and then I found out I'm like, this is what they have me doing. Holy crap. They have you doing this FNAF style gameplay to get rid of them, where there's these 4 hallways, you have to use your flare gun to check if he's real, and then if he's real you have to trigger the gas to shoo him away or something. But it's not just as simple as like you press a button, you know what I mean? It was like, use the flare gun, and then if he's real then you have to like jump up on this podium, switch to your green hand, get the electricity, get the green hand back. You're switching between your flare gun hand, your purple jumping hand, and then your green hand, all within like a short amount of time, and it was just stressful as hell. And then they added on this hatch on the ceiling that freaking opens up that you have to keep down. Freaking nightmare. Finally you finish that, and then with both Mommy Longlegs and Catnap, they kind of get swooped away by the prototype in a certain way, but Catnap's was more of an extravagant way, because the hand of the prototype just comes down, stabs him through the throat, which you're kind of glad to see, and then pulls him away. So yeah, and then after the prototype absolutely just obliterates Catnap and pulls him away, then you finally have this moment of like, hey, we're getting out of here. You're about to get lowered into this sort of mining kind of elevator that they have, but before you do that, Poppy shows you a tape about the Hour of Joy, and that's where you learn about how all the toys kind of went rogue and just shat on everybody who was in Playtime at the time, and just that's when things went south and everybody died pretty much. Then you hear Kissy off in the distance, who stayed behind to be able to pull the lever, is getting messed up by something, but you don't know what. Chapter 3, in my opinion, that definitely takes last place at number 5, because this one was just a nightmare, dude. I honestly was like having visceral reactions. Like I was getting stressed with the thought of having to push forward to persevere through this chapter, because it was just so daunting. A lot less intuitive things. Everything was just extremely difficult for me, at least. I'm not a prime gamer, so you know, to me I was just like, what the hell is going on? It's one of those things, like I appreciate Catnap as a character because I think he's a really cool character in the sense that he's really scary, and I think all the characters in this chapter were definitely fit the vibe of a horror game, but in the sense of like, I was not prepared for this at all, and it ended up just like really kind of sucking to have to play it. That's kind of why I give it a 5, just because it was just so much. It was a lot. It was a lot. It really made my hair gray. Chapter 4, Safe Haven, I think what happened was the developers were like, yo, we just railed these people with a crazy freaking chapter, but we gotta dial that back. Chapter 4 was very lore based. It wasn't really a whole lot of challenges going on. Chapter 4 starts off where we're continuing to go down this mining shaft and Poppy's like, hold on, Kissy, I'm coming for you, baby. And then she's basically like, all right, you have fun with that. I'm gonna go back up. And then you're like, God damn it, here we go again. And you really don't run into anything until we meet Doughboy, the Play-Doh man. We meet Doughy because you fall down a thing, there's a Pianosaurus who's about to eat you, and then Doughy just absolutely tanks the freaking Pianosaurus and eats him. And then he comes in, he's like, don't worry, I'm not going to eat you. And then you're all excited because you're like, oh, he's a good guy. And then he basically starts leading you back to Safe Haven. Safe Haven is this little nest of survivors that they built kind of in the depths of all this that's in a secure place. And it's kind of where you're all getting together to regroup and figure out a plan of action. So basically what they say they need in chapter 4 is there's a different hand that you now need called the Omni hand, which should be the key to figure out everything. You get the Omni hand and then it helps kind of work as like this master hand to help with everything else they need. And then that's when Poppy starts sharing her idea of like, yo, we're gonna get some C4 and we're gonna blow this John to the moon. And throughout this chapter you kind of hear how Doughy kind of disagrees with that thought process because he doesn't want everybody to die. You know, all the work they've put into keeping everybody alive just to kill everybody in the process, trying to get rid of the prototype. He didn't really see the point in that. Nonetheless, you still make your way around and you start planting bombs into the bottom of this factory. One of the only main bosses that we meet is the doctor, who is one of the doctors of the company who's now a computer guy, and he kind of works with the prototype and all this other stuff. He takes like 2 seconds to kill. He's got these weird little freaking computer guys that run around like birds. But you kind of just go through, you shut off his computer, and then you're like, really, that was it? And then you move on to your final boss, which actually ended up being Doughy the whole time because you plant the bombs, they end up going off, and it obliterates Safe Haven, killing everybody. And by the time you get back to Safe Haven, Doughy is really pissed off because now everybody's dead and he thinks he failed them. And it's like bringing in all these emotions, and then he transforms into this Pokemon guy and he tries coming after you. And so you basically just have to freeze him with these canisters and saw him a couple of times. After you do that, this whole final scene happens where he's trying to really come after you, but he's under this giant grinder that's obviously going to kill him. And then he's just like, I'm sorry. Like, I just wanted to do good. And you just feel bad for him. You know what I mean? You're just like, oh no, Doughy. And this is where things really take a huge plot twist at the end of chapter 4. And that is when at the very end, you meet up with Poppy and Kissy and you get a phone call from Ollie. Now, I didn't explain this in chapter 3. I forgot about it, but Ollie is a character who comes out of the woodworks and starts helping us over the telephone all through chapter 3. You never meet Ollie in person. You just kind of hear him on the phone being like, okay, here's what you got to do next. So they've been helping the whole time, basically. And at the end of chapter 4, you find out Ollie is actually one of the many voices that the prototype has, and has actually just been using it as a way to kind of know what you guys' plans are, what you're doing, where you're at, stuff like that. Poppy says, I can't believe this, and then she runs away. And then Kissy and you freaking get exploded by something, and then you fall down a giant hole, and then you're down in this laboratory, and then you find out that Huggy Wuggy is actually not dead, and he is coming after your ass. And then the chapter ends. I think chapter 4 deserves the solid number 3 position. I think this placed number 3 for me because it was such a relief after the stress of what chapter 3 was, but at the same time, it wasn't one of the best ones. You learn to love Doughy, and it's kind of sad that he died. You feel bad about that, but he's not really intimidating. The doctor wasn't really intimidating. There was not much in the game that was stressful or hard necessarily. So it was just kind of going through the motions. And then on top of it, it's like, I think the only kind of weight that the chapter had was the plot twist that you get at the end. For me too, this chapter kind of sucked because it was glitching out like a mother. Like at the final battle where I'm trying to defeat Doughy, I kept getting launched out of the map. It was freaking ridiculous. I don't know what was going on.
It's too loud. What the hell, dude?
I tried texting in the frickin' Discord, the Mob Entertainment Discord, but they had hour-long timers in between chats. So when I asked, being like, anybody else had a problem with this? And someone was asking questions for me to clarify on, I couldn't respond to an hour later. And then by the time I could respond, Chapter 5 was dropping. So that whole chat just got buried. So I have no idea if anybody answered my question. But yeah, my game was glitching out really bad, especially towards the end there. Yeah, it was just kind of a good breather, I think, to set us up for what is to come in Chapter 5. This was the heavily awaited chapter that everybody was gossiping and talking about. You know, a little bit of locker room chat, if you will. This was a big one because based off of the cover, based up to everything leading to it, this was going to be the final time that we had learned what the prototype looks like. And Chapter 5 starts off with the same scene we ended off on Chapter 4, where you're in this underground science laboratory area and Huggy Wuggy's like, yo, what up? Bring me that ass. So you start off running away from Huggy Wuggy and you start to see some of the things that a lot of people have been curious about. People were wondering about who this red guy was that has been alluded to in some of the art that Mob Entertainment has posted. We've also seen trailers of other characters that we have been interested in. So as you're running away from Huggy Wuggy, you see the red guy kind of peek away for a second. You're like, what was that? And then you get into this elevator, and as the elevator's going up, Huggy Wuggy drops down, rips off your freaking hand, your Omni hand, and then the elevator crashes and you plummet to the depths of hell pretty much. And this is where you're kind of down in this broke down area, sewage kind of area. I can't really remember what they called it specifically, but we get introduced to a new character called Giblet, the Jables. And Giblet is this little messed up kind of ferret looking guy who is your new sort of help instead of Ollie. And I tell you what, I fell in love with this character. I love this character a lot. He was kind of in a little duo ship with the red guy, who we find out later in this chapter is a man named Chum. And he's just kind of like that purple dude from McDonald's in a way, but he's red. And then he's just friends with this little ferret guy, Giblet. And I just find it pretty funny. And they're kind of helping you recover from whatever the hell just happened. Kind of final steps being like, yo, we got to take this guy out. And so you get a new grab pack. You get introduced to a new pressure hand and whatnot. And in this chapter, you also get a conductor hand, which a conductor hand allows you to transfer flame energy and electricity energy and cold energy and all this other stuff. After you kind of work through the depths of all this weird underground stuff, then you go into this area where we come across Lily Love Braids or something or another, and she's this crazy schizophrenic mommy long legs kind of deal where she just has her hair just like floating all around the hoe, freaking talking to the stuffed animal that's in her hair, and she's just a whole bag of nuts. She's just a whole bag of trail mix with extra raisins, if you know what I mean. And you kind of have to poke around her house and get the table ready for the big dinner with their special guests. You find out Kissy and Poppy are locked up in her basement, and they're both like, I can't believe you're alive. So you set them free, and as you're trying to run away from her, then they sit you down getting ready for the tea party or whatever's going on. And this is when we introduce the one, the only, the prototype. The prototype busts through the wall like a freaking bowl in a freaking china shop and is like, yo, it's me, the Jester from Poppy Playtime. And he's pissed at Poppy because he's like, yo, why you been doing all this stuff? Plotting against me, dude. What's the deal? And he starts to like kind of clench Poppy's face. He breaks her a little bit because she's like this porcelain doll. And then Kissy starts going after his ass, rips out his freaking gas chamber or something or the other. I don't even know what that was all about. Ripped out his gas chamber. Everybody starts fighting. And then for some reason, everybody just flees at the same time. Everybody just runs away. And then this is the point where you're kind of doing your final chase scenes. Lily starts chasing you out of her house until you just break the little cloud she's standing on. She gets absolutely smashed into 3 billion pieces. And then basically, as you're working through the tunnels, you have to run from Huggy Wuggy again, which makes us all think like, Jesus Christ, how many times do I gotta run from this guy in this freaking series? And right as Huggy Wuggy's about to catch you, then he locks eyes with Kissy and he's like, oh my God, my beloved, I've missed you so much. Come here, baby girl. And right as they're about to just embrace in the biggest, sloppiest, scariest, hottest kiss you've ever seen, he experiences the same fate as Catnap, where he just gets absolutely yoinked by the needle hands of the prototype. He's dead. Kissy just gets shat onto for no reason. He's just going for just no witnesses kind of deal. And then you hop on this train and you're trying to derail different parts of the train to keep him back. You're like electrocuting him and all this jazz while the prototype's chasing you. Then they basically accelerate this train and you all jump off of the train. You think it kills the prototype, but he rises like a boxer from the ashes and you realize he's not dead. Then he stabs the shit out of you, throws you into some sort of weird incubator fluid, the frickin' Poppy peanut butter juice that they got going on. And then you're like, damn, there's no way that's how that ended. Am I seriously dead? And then lo and behold, Giblet the ferret pulls you out and is like, what up, baby girl? And then you continue to look for some sort of backup thing. I don't think I really fully put the pieces together of what he was talking about because I'm just like, why are we worried about the backup dude? But we had the opportunity to kill this guy. He was right there. What are we still trying to repair things in the factory for? Or shut him down or what? I don't know. And you go to shut down this computer and that's where chapter 5 ends and you find out the doctor who was very easy to kill in chapter 4 is actually not dead, and he's like, well, it's me, Morgan Freeman, and you find out he's still alive. So this chapter, I'm going to put this chapter at number 1, but I will say there is some gripes that I have about it. I was talking about this with one of my friends, and it's like, I thought it was a really good chapter. One, I just love the style of it. I love the art that's in it. I just love the setup and how everything looks. Everything's just so freaking cool. I love some of the new characters that we've introduced. I like that we got to meet the prototype. I think he looked really sick. The gameplay was, again, back to that same feeling as chapter 2, where it was like stressful, but it wasn't too stressful. Like it was difficult enough to be like difficult, but it wasn't impossible. Things were intuitive enough to make it enjoyable, if that makes sense, compared to chapter 3. But I think some of the gripes I have is, one, I think the prototype being a jester doesn't really make any sense. I don't think it aligns to whatever the little homage that Catnap had of him was. And I think considering he's like a prototype, he should have been more a fucked up character who is not fully finished. I know a lot of concepts early on was going to be that he was going to be made up of different parts of other characters, which would make sense of why he would be dragging them away after they died, because maybe he's using parts of these other characters to assemble himself even more. But he ended up kind of being this weird, clean-cut kind of robot guy. Like his whole top half was all super clean. Like, I don't know, there just wasn't enough chink in weirdness to him to make sense as like the prototype, where it's like a prototype of a normal toy would kind of be like a messed up first mock-up version of something. It's not going to be perfect. So I thought that was kind of weird. And the fact that he was a jester specifically, I don't get the importance of that either. I don't know how that tied into to the fact that his voice kind of had this bumblebee thing going on where he like switches around voices. That's where I think the concept of him being made up of the other toys would make sense, because he has all these different voices ingrained in him. But then they're just like, surprise, he's half spider, half knitting needles, half jester. And it's like, what? I feel like that had nothing to do with what we were building up, but go ahead, I guess. I also have a problem in the sense of they really introduced a lot of new stuff in this chapter. It feels like the developers are going to shoot for like at least 8 chapters in this game, but it almost feels like this is going to turn into like a TV series that you think just needs to die. You know what I mean? Like, I think they're starting to kind of drag it on a little further than it needs to be. Again, plot twist, you find out the doctor's not dead. You're not even close to killing the prototype. He just survived a freaking train crash, so obviously this dude's freaking invincible. And they're introducing all these new characters and aspects where you've already think you've wiped out half of the factory of its bad guys, but you're gonna find out that there's more real quick. Who is Giblet? What's his association to Poppy? Like, they don't really explain that a whole lot, or what's going on, or what his deal is. They don't ever explain anything about who this chum character is and why he's the assistant to the prototype. I mean, I think Mob Entertainment, they're really riding on this game series that they're just like, okay, and then how can we turn it around again? When it's just like, in my head, I'm like, dude, you should have just cut it at that, been like, hell yeah, high fives all around, let's start a new game. You know what I mean? But I think they're really trying to let this ride. So for me, it feels like this is really opening the door for it to feel like it's stretching out a little bit longer than it needs to be. But nonetheless, I still put this at number 1 because I loved so much about it. I didn't really care about the lore too much. I loved the gameplay. I loved being able to see the characters. I loved the feeling that the characters gave off. I loved just a lot about it. It was just a lot of fun. It reminded me of chapter 2, but even better. We got some big reveals that we were looking for, and there was just a big oh shit at the end. So it was fun enough for me to be like, this was the most fun I've had. I was willing to sit it down and play it all in one sitting, actually. So, I don't know. Great chapter. Overall, this is a crazy series, and I'm sure I missed a lot of important details of what happened in these different chapters, but this is a whole rabbit hole that I was not expecting at all. Poppy Playtime is a really good series that I didn't know I was going to enjoy it as much as I have, because just originally when I started playing it, I thought it was going to be like a FNAF thing. You know what I mean? But I love this more than like a FNAF game because there's it's a story-based game. There's a lot of story behind it. Meanwhile, FNAF is very like fan-based lore. I think my main gripes with the series as a whole is that the lore doesn't come out as much in the gameplay. It's more you have to be looking for the tapes and the letters and the whatever and really paying attention to those and piecing those together, as well as being involved with the out-of-game stuff that they do, like their YouTube channel where they post different videos to kind of tag along to it, you know, just different things like that. Therefore, there's a lot of stuff that's not very obvious if you were to just straight play through the game. And that's the thing too, is for the lore to be so important to what's going on and for them to be baking a lot of that into the tapes and the notes and the whatever, they're not always in obvious areas. And on top of the fact, it's like you don't always find them, so it's almost you're screwed. You know what I mean? You can't just play the game and not have those, but at the same time, they're kind of hard to find, and you kind of don't want to waste a whole lot of time trying to find them. So I don't know. Overall, great series though. Let me know what you think about this ranking, and tell me your opinions on any of these chapters. And if there's anything I glossed over that you want to be heard, make sure you throw those in the comments too, because I know people be reading those. Thank you so much. I appreciate you watching this video, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.